Good evening, everybody. Hope you're having a great weekend, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be doing an episode of the Q&A because it's been a long time, and no real news from ArenaNet for today. However, there was a small red post I will throw out there straight away on the fact that there's going to be a change and a cap added to the game on the amount of gold you can send to people. In Guild Wars 2, there's going to be a 500 gold cap now, so you can't receive a mail with more than 500 G in it, plus a few other small changes. These are basically only there to stop people being able to easily buy and sell gold through like third-party websites and so forth, or scammers. You know, someone hacks your account and they try and get all the money off it all at once. There's going to be hard limits in place there that stop that kind of thing from happening. I'll have a link down in the description if you guys want to check it out, but they make it sound like really, and I know for the way I play the game, it shouldn't affect people for day-to-day stuff. The background footage is likely going to be some PvP. You guys really enjoyed the power necro stuff. I have, thanks to one of my guildies, started getting a little bit more into the burst LE playstyle. I'm still terrible at it. I still feel horrible that I've lost all of my abilities I once had. However, I am also not very highly rated in PvP anymore, and so my opponents aren't necessarily the greatest either. So hopefully that goes well. If it's not that, then it will be some running around interior with our sweet new graphics. So let's jump into the questions. The first one comes from Icarus Galvatori XX21, who has an incredible name. It says, question, in your interview video, this would be the one where I interviewed the devs, they said the begin demo screen actually has the cinematic login style intro. Do you think this will be returning with the Heart of Thorns expansion? And also, do you actually want it back as a checkbox in the options, or do you like the condensed login screen better? I do like the condensed login screen. So the condensed one is the one we have now, where you can hit the icon, it will load up and it will give you a little bit of news and it will show you the patcher there. But I do very much miss that old login screen. I've told you guys before, one of my earliest memories of Guild Wars 2, those early betas, was waking up and it had all downloaded and all I could hear was that beautiful music in the background. I loved the old login screen. I'd love to see something like that come back, and they still obviously have the capability for this kind of thing as they're showing us in the demos. I think this would be really cool, and a checkbox would be the best of both worlds, no? But I actually don't think it's very likely either. Zarek1703 says, do you think that the devs will give us any new arenas in PvP, such as the Codex Arena in GW1 as an example? Now, not everyone here is going to know what the Codex Arena was. Guild Wars 1's combat was very different, and one of the things it was very heavily based on was this idea of card games almost, Magic the Gathering in particular. And you could kind of view each skill you slotted onto your bar as almost being like a card, and your bar was kind of like your deck or so forth. And so basically you could draft. The Codex Arena was sort of a way of drafting a decent build for yourself, and you play against other people who had to draft their own builds too. So there were thousands of skills in Guild Wars 1, loads of them, and the meta was very tight and very specific, and so many skills went entirely unused. And the Codex Arena was this cool PvP arena where you couldn't pick anything you wanted in the whole game. You'd be restricted, as would everyone else, to use only a certain number of things, and what those things were would rotate like on a daily basis or so. And so you'd log in and you would, instead of running all the meta builds, you'd be forced to play with these different skills, perhaps usually subpar skills, but you're still on a level playing field with all the other people. It was a really cool idea. Unfortunately, the arena died very quickly. It came a little bit too late into Guild Wars 2's lifespan, and the main problem with Guild Wars 1 when it comes to PvP, as much as I look very fondly back on this fact, was the fact that it had so many different game types. You know, the PvP was a huge part of Guild Wars 1, a huge part. But these people were split across tons of different game types. ArenaNet were really, really fast and loose with adding a bunch of different PvP game types, and that very quickly crippled their matchmaking, and it crippled the population that existed in each specific type of arena. You know, you'd have people trying to play hero battles, you'd have people trying to play team battles, you'd have people in the random arenas, you'd have people in GVG, you'd have people in Heroes Ascent, you'd have people in Fort Aspenwood, Jade Quarry. It went on and on and on. It was ridiculous. And so they've always been very scared of that in Guild Wars 2. First of all, I would question the value of a Codex Arena in Guild Wars 2, as there are many less skills, a lot more stuff is viable in the first place, and obviously it would be a lot of effort for them to start locking stuff out and figure it out in that way. So first of all, I question the value of a Codex Arena, and I also would just say I doubt they'll add many game types for a long time, right? Like, even Stronghold, I think they probably went through a lot of pains deciding whether it really was worth adding to the game. Because, again, you know, they add this thing in here, it's like, well, what are they supporting now? Are they supporting Conquest or Stronghold? They're saying they can support both. Do we have the confidence? Do we really believe that they are capable of supporting both? You know, what if they added a third and a fourth? It's just It's a very different game, and I think it was a mistake to add so many game types back in GW1, and I like the way that they're doing it now in Guild Wars 2. The only reason I'm so happy about Stronghold is because I am not a big fan of Conquest at all, and so I think this could be something that really makes Guild Wars 2. Alright, so moving on to the next question. This is from Mad Minds, who says, "Hey WP, I saw in your video on the stability FOV patch delay that you talked about the whole thing of some professions only getting an offhand, and to some people they think that this is unfair. This made me think, though. It has been stated specializations will bring in a new weapon that their profession wasn't able to use before, but there has been no statement about moving current weapons from one hand to the other. For example, being Mesmer's getting a shield, but maybe also they would get the ability to use main hand pistol on top of that, since it's not a new weapon for the class. Don't know if I've missed anything, but do you think this is possible?" I do think this is possible. And if you look at a quote where they say, you know, people who only get an offhand, they'll be happy anyway, it kind of makes sense that they would also then perhaps shift one of their existing weapons into the offhand. Think about like an Elementalist moving their scepter over to their offhand or something like that. Elementalist is obviously the oddball because it gets achievements too, and we'll be happy even with just an offhand on that class. Though it looks like we're getting a main hand, which is the sword. But this idea of also then enabling the Chronomancer to have pistol main hand, yeah, I could see that. I really could see that. That would be pretty interesting. And maybe that is the direction they're going in. The only thing that I would suggest, though, that may mean this isn't happening is why wouldn't they have talked about this? You know, why wouldn't they just be able to quite blatantly say, yeah, you know, some of these guys, they're only going to get offhands, but you might see a weapon swap over to another slot somehow. You know, why would that be so difficult for them to announce if that was in the plans? Maybe the truth is it's not finalized just yet, and this is an idea still floating around for them, but I think it's solid. I really do. I think it's a great idea, and why not ultimately? Psionic Fox says, "Having just finished Season 2 on my Sylvari, there are some exclusive revelations about the Pale Tree and your dream. How asymmetrical do you think Heart of Thorns will be for Sylvari characters, given that one of the devs, Colin, strongly suggested getting a Sylvari ready for the expansion? How different would you like it to be or think it should be?" I don't think it should be super different. Like, I appreciate that this would be something really cool for Sylvari players, but again, I'd rather everyone who plays the expansion pack gets this really, really cool experience. I think what we'll find is there might be a few different dialogue options, as we already have, right? Different dialogue options depending on the race that we play. And I think that because they already do that, they're going to be able to key into it a bit more when it comes to Sylvari. Maybe you have a fair bit more dialogue every now and then, and maybe you will feel more emotionally attached to the story, so it's worth playing as a Sylvari. But I don't think we're going to see huge narrative shifts, and I don't think we're going to see like exclusive missions just for Sylvari or anything like that. I think from what we've seen in the demo, at least, and given that the demo is trying to demonstrate to us, you know, overall themes and ideas of how Heart of Thorns works, given that the demo kind of has this very clear, hey, we're getting a choice, and the choice is, do you like the Sylvari? Are you going to be sympathetic to them? Or are you not going to be sympathetic to them? Since that is very clearly what they've set up, I think that the majority of the story will be along those lines. Like, any differentiation between the missions we do and decisions we made are probably going to be motivated by that. And yeah, you know, it could be really interesting then to play as a Sylvari who is also not very sympathetic to any other Sylvari. You know, maybe you're a self-hating Sylvari, you have no confidence that you yourself might become corrupted by Morgemoth somehow, and you are fearful of your brethren. Like, that'd be cool, and I'd love to see that be a thing, but overall, I don't think there will be too much asymmetry, just extra little tidbits and things, as we even saw in the Living World. There have been 4 Sylvari characters. Look at the vision we got when we got to go in Omad's machine. You know, Sylvari characters got that little bit more. They often do. Next question from Tio Leaf, who says, "Hey WP, I just had a thought today about possibility that the new mastery system will bring, particularly with lore masteries. If masteries like this allow us to enter the domain of and interact with races like the Itzel, Exalted, and Nuok, do you think that in future updates we could have a mastery line added in for Tengu lore that would allow us to interact with them some more and maybe even enter the Dominion of Winds?" What a great idea! Now, Guild Wars 2 is very much about being accessible and open, but I love the idea that there are masteries that can give us such big, significant things like this. You know, a mastery track that lets you get into the Dominion of Winds is a phenomenal idea. A mastery track that you ultimately have to complete to learn how to communicate with the elementals and get into the castle at Garenhof or something. These are really, really big ideas and exciting ones to me. If you're looking at a lot of other MMOs, you tend to have like a class or races that they're only accessible to you as a player after you've already leveled an existing thing to 60 or 70 or 80 or whatever. Now, that's quite a common thing in MMOs. They don't do it in Guild Wars 2 because obviously they want things to be very open. But I will not deny that I'm the kind of player that the thought of like a mastery track, that by mastering this track you get to enter the Dominion of Winds, and it unlocks Tengu as a playable race. And the only way you'll be playing as Tengu is by, like, having finished this mastery track on your account. That is a phenomenal idea to me. Like, what a can you get a better reward than giving people a new race to play? I don't think you really can. So I would sign up for that. Do I think it's going to happen to Guild Wars 2? Unlikely. And certainly not likely in the short term anyway. It's interesting to think about the directions that masteries can go, though. Andrea says, do you really think they will kill off Trahearne? Honestly, I don't think he's bad. He's actually one of my favorite characters. The biggest problem we have with him is because he's a higher rank than us, and everyone wants to be the person who can be on a pedestal like a god. I mean, I think that they'd be killing him because of the community, but I also think that he's a big part of the story, and that they brought back his voice actor makes this unlikely. Why would they bring him back just to kill him off 2 minutes later? I have quite a lot to say on this. First of all, I think not everyone who wants Trahearne dead is because they think he's a bad character. I really like Trahearne as a character, but I would still be happy to see him die. Why? Because sometimes good characters do die, and that kind of tragedy there can really add something to the story. So I don't think when you always hear someone say, oh, Trahearne might die in the expansion, it's because they don't like the character at all. I do think that there's a good chance ArenaNet recognize a lot of people didn't like Trahearne, and then they might try and kill him off. I honestly think that yes, he will die. I don't think it's going to be killing him off 2 minutes later, though, either. I stand by the fact that I think he's going to be corrupted by Morgemoth, perhaps immediately as soon as the expansion begins, or some point early on in the story. And I think he's going to become like a general of the Elder Dragon. And I think the guy we kill before Morgemoth, perhaps even the guy we kill after Morgemoth, as like the final boss, was our old friend, old War Marshal of the Pact, Trahearne. I think that's a really cool story. I think ArenaNet will have seen the opportunity to tell that story. And unless now they're going to be like, oh no, too many people are expecting it, we're not going to do it anymore. I think it's very likely they may go in that direction. And so yes, Trahearne may die, but we'll get a whole expansion further worth of detail on his character and time with his character as a friend perhaps, but also as an enemy. And when we finally kill him, it's kind of like this bittersweet victory. That's what I'd love to see. Urban Stojko says, WP, what feature would you like to see most in Heart of Thorns but will not likely ever be implemented? There's a lot of features. Again, it's like I was just talking about, you know, like masteries, eventually unlocking the Tengu. These are things that excite me. Given the guild that I'm a part of, given how much fun I had when Tequatl came out, when the Triple Trouble Worm came out, I would love to see a lot more world boss overhauls. I would love to see Jormag be overhauled. I'd love to see the Shatterer, many of those other bosses too. And I would like to see, you know, more hardcore things like world first recognition be a thing in the game. You know, I really would like to see that. And I'd like to see as well, beyond the world boss stuff, I'd love to see like re-leveling systems come into the game. You know, that little gold star you get. Well, once I get that gold star, let me re-level my character, and if I manage to do it again, except this time I do half damage and I take double damage or whatever, you know, if I manage to get to the end without dying, give me a shinier star or something. I'd love that, you know, just encourage people to constantly be exploring the old areas and having this kind of tense, cool, fun experience, because there's not much tension in Guild Wars 2 anywhere. That's what I miss more than anything else, tension. This game doesn't really offer it. And while I think, yes, that may be returned somewhat if they're actually going for real hard content in this expansion, we've still not heard very much about that. And these are systems I think they would never really take the full plunge for. The next question is from Comet Fireclaw, who says, do you think Trahearne Balefire will come back? At the end of Path 2 of Koth, they are trying to resurrect him. Afterwards, you can actually find his coffin chained down, much like the Bloody Prince's, ... I think this is a really cool idea. Trahearne, I'm not sure I think he's absolutely going to come back. He was a cool idea. Like, when you would read about the plot, you know, the setting for Guild Wars 2, and you hear about the struggles of the Char and opposing the Gold Legion or the Flame Legion, and you hear about Trahearne Balefire at the head, and even in a lot of those early areas, once you're actually playing the game, you see the references to Trahearne, and they kind of set him up a little bit as this big badass. He's kind of one of these really cool characters that was very exciting, and then, ultimately, the way he died, and the way that a lot of the dungeon story stuff was handled was just horrible to me, and it didn't pay off in a very big way. So I do think he's this cool character that still has a lot of untapped potential just because they sort of botched his initial story, and that would be a good reason to bring him back. But you know, I don't think we'd see him in Heart of Thorns, and I think logically, if he's dead now, maybe we can just let the story lie. That they are going to have to explain to us what's going on with the Flame Legion now, and maybe when we get a more Char-centric expansion, that's when that will finally happen. The reason I picked this question more, though, was because it just got me thinking about a lot of characters like this, and if you guys really close your eyes, or when you next play through the personal story, you start thinking about this, there's a lot of people. It's kind of like what I was talking about with the Pale Reavers making a reappearance in the expansion, that being very exciting to me. There's a lot of guys like Trahearne. The main one that I was thinking of for dungeons in particular is COE. All the explorable modes, you're dealing with Subject Alpha, this very, very dangerous experiment that has been let loose within the facility. And what do you know? At the end of all three of those paths, you never kill Subject Alpha. He turns into his little tar monster guys and he runs away. You know, this is some kind of a setup. Will we see Subject Alpha return? A Subject Beta or Zeta or whatever in the X-Pack? There's a lot of these small threads, and I don't know. I think all of them are quite exciting. Trahearne's definitely one of them. I just don't think he's that likely. Oleg Budanok says, "Hey WP, how much time do you spend in Guild Wars these days?" Actually, not that much. The past few weeks, I've been occupied more with other things, but I do make sure I at least get in, go get my login reward, and try and get those 10 achievement points each day. I open the little bandit locked chest every day as well, in the hope that I'll get a preserved Queen Bee, because that's like my ultimate I need it thing for me right now. Yeah, once I finish my Ambrite collection, the main thing I'm working on in game now is the Treasure Hunter collection, where I need Sam and I need Commissar's Manifesto and so forth. And these are just these huge, massively expensive items that they don't feel fun to buy, so I'm kind of just stalling as I slowly acquire a little bit of money. Beyond that, I'm probably just PvPing. It depends. It depends how addicted I get to certain things. The next question from Gabrielle Stubakar, who says, "Hey, any idea on what happens if someone gets hit by a taunt from 2 different Revenants?" Great question! Now, obviously, taunt isn't just exclusive to Revenants. We've heard about it mostly from them, of course, because none of the other classes have ever had access to it before. But don't forget, we're getting specializations for all the classes, and Revenant will not be the only one with Taunt. But yeah, what happens if one target gets hit by 2 taunts? I don't know the answer to this, though I'm pretty sure it's the kind of thing that it would be floating out there. Does the taunt maintain on the initial person until that would have worn off and then it swaps, or does it immediately swap to the second person? I would guess it's the former, just so that people can't easily grief and, you know, break stacks from tanks and so forth necessarily, but it's curious. There's a lot of like tweaks and implementations that they could have done there, and I don't know the answer. The next question is from Conan, who says, "Hey WP, how do you think the end fight with Morgemoth will look like?" I don't think it will look anything like the Zaitan fight. I highly doubt it will be on an airship. I think it's very likely that it could be in multiple phases. There's so much evidence that the Zaitan fight was supposed to be in multiple phases, and ultimately, you know, one of them got massively cut out. I think, actually, when you look at the way that they designed the Wyvern fight, and the way they talk about the Wyvern fight, is they're often saying, hey, this is very different to other big bosses we've had before because it's very active. You know, this isn't like a static thing, almost like a structure. In many cases, wild bosses are technically counted as structures that doesn't really move, just has some canned animations. This is a real guy that will be flying around and will be moving and will be aggroed in different areas and so forth. So, what I think they might be trying to do with Morgemoth as well is go down that same route too, and not have this kind of big static, oh, it's a giant fancy looking wall that we're hacking away at. I think, you know, they'll try and keep that active perspective on it. And given what I just said about phases too, I think, you know, maybe they will have like one of these classic style boss parts where we're looking at Morgemoth in his full glory and we kind of hack at him a little bit, but then maybe we go into another phase where we chop off a huge part of his body and then we're fighting this part of his body, you know, similar to how Zaitan had many mouths or whatever. I think that's the way they could do it. I do not think it is very likely at all cannons will have anything to do with the fight. I think environmental weapons in general will not have anything to do with the fight. It could be in a 5-man instance. They could sort of look and take a page out of the World of Warcraft book where they say, yeah, look, some of the biggest story moments all happen in like the hardcore, difficult bits at the end. Maybe they'll try and go down that line. Or we could even be looking at an open worldy style thing. It depends how innovative they want to be with their new map mechanics and so forth. But yeah, I think it's easier to say what will not be there rather than what will be there. And lastly, to finish the video off, Gizmo says, hey WP, what if one day you were scratching your back and you found a zipper on your skin? Once you pull it, you find out you're actually a tomato and your life is a lie. On a scale of 1 to 10, how mad would you be? This is a very important question and very serious. Well, I can tell you, I would absolutely be a 9 out of 10 mad. That would be devastating news, and I hope that it is not the case. Well, there you go, guys. Thanks very much for watching the Q&A. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'll be reading from there to select the questions for next week's episode. Cheers, guys. Have a great day. Catch you next time.